This arcade cabinet has been in the works for a while now. A year now, I've been making videos, making upgrades, tweaks, and different iterations of it. Starting from running an old Raspberry Pi 4, to upgrading it to my old gaming rig, which had an old AMD quad core and a 660 Ti. And now, it's finally reached its complete form. I say complete with quotes because I'm already thinking about upgrades, but I'll talk about those later. So I want to preface this by saying this is not what I would call a budget project, nor would I call it simple. But what I will call it is a passion project. And here's why. I grew up with pretty much everything I needed as a kid, but one thing I wanted that I just could not have was a nearby arcade. But what I'm trying to say is I wanted to be a part of that arcade culture, and I just couldn't. Just logistically. It was more of a delicacy that I got to have ever so often. Just a taste, you know? Now almost 30 years later, here we are. I don't have a full price breakdown of the current iteration of this yet, but I will put it somewhere on the screen and give you a pretty accurate idea of what something like this will cost you. So of course, links to everything will be in the description, but one thing I will do is put alternate links for alternatives to products that are just as good, but I can find cheaper. So all the wooden components came from an Etsy shop, everything came pre-cut, all the holes came pre-drilled. The only thing I really had to do was I had to take these kind of long blocks of wood and glue them on for the mounting points that the actual kind of screws went into. But other than that, it was a pretty simple process. Very minimal amount of screws. All the screws were the same size. Hopefully this Etsy shop is still up and running because they did a really good job. As you can see, the buttons here are different on the left and the right. The right side really doesn't get much use. This is just a cheap Amazon kit that I'll link, but this is a little bit more of an advanced situation that I have going on. I wanted to have that kind of same experience that the fighting game community has, so I basically copied exactly some of the components that they use and incorporated it into the arcade cabinet. So no, these buttons and this joystick weren't as cheap as some of the ones you can find on Amazon, but it is fighting game community certified equipment. And as you can hear, those buttons are nice and clicky sounding. That is because they use real keyboard switches inside of them. So if I wanted to, I could pop the caps off of all these buttons here, reach into my drawer and pop in some new keyboard switches if I want them to have a different sound or have different feedback. So I see why they're a little bit more expensive. So the mechanism that takes the controller and joystick input and converts that into computer input is called a Brook board. It's not quite a plug and play solution. There's no soldering involved. You just got to kind of understand what goes where, what's a ground wire and what's not. And then you're able to use software like Steam to actually map the buttons, which makes it super easy to set one of these up. The monitor is the cheapest 32-inch TV that I could find at Walmart that was 1080p. The paint job is most definitely new. If you've ever seen a video with this arcade cabinet in it, you'll know it's just been that raw wood color the entire time. Not super easy on the eyes. It was definitely due for some paint. So I just did all the inside pieces all black. The top is not painted. The back is not painted. You're not going to see those anyway. And then for the exterior, I went with that classic millennial gray. So what gray actually is this? This is like NES gray. Like look at this. Millennial gray, NES gray. Either are acceptable. Oh yeah, if you're wondering what this thing is, this is the microphone I use for live streaming. I do plan on streaming more now that I have it built kind of how I want it now. So the part that I'm most excited about, and it's probably the most boring part of the whole thing, is this edging that I found on Amazon. The gray matches up almost perfectly with the paint. It's just furniture edging that you would put like around a coffee table or something. Some of the sort of custom cosmetics that I made, you'll see here that this dust filter actually comes off and is attached with a magnet strip that's on the inside of the dust filter. And I put these little metal stickers here. These are much more stiff. These are more like PVC, and this is more just like thin nylon. So I kind of cut these down to fit. There's two of them here, and they slide right where the marquee is normally supposed to go, where you'll see, you know, something like MAME or, you know, the name of the arcade. Instead of that, I needed airflow coming out of the top, so there are fans back here. The idea is cold air in the bottom, hot air rises, hot air gets blown out the top. That's the idea anyways. So now let's go over the PC components. Like I said, this is running the exact rig that I used to have before I upgraded my gaming PC to where it is now. It's running a few generations old, or probably several generations old now, 8-core AMD processor. I think it's using an old 8GB of RAM set that I had laying around. It's running a relatively small SSD for the main boot drive. There is a reason why I didn't go for a super big boot drive or have any other additional drives in the unit, because I'm basically going to store all the games off of the arcade cabinet, and I'll be able to retrieve them over my network. The reason for that is because if I ever want to upgrade to Linux, I don't want to be super dependent on the file system that I have currently on the boot drive or any other drives that are on this. I want to, if I ever wanted to get an AMD graphics card and switch from the 1070 Ti that's in there, I'll be able to just wipe the drive, pop Linux on there, and switch back ever if I want to. The cooling system, I did change around a little bit from the prototype phase, and I put the fans on some Velcro strips and aligned them kind of on the side inside of the unit. So there is still air being blown in directly, and that air is getting pulled in, and I guess moreover from here and getting blown this direction. And then hopefully, if everything goes right, the fans that are kind of right here behind the top of the unit is taking that hot air and just pushing it right out the top. I am really happy with how this thing turned out, but it's missing something. It's missing that open source feel, you know what I mean? It's running Windows 10. I am using a open source application to manage my games called Play Night. I really want to use Linux, but I can't do that with an NVIDIA graphics card. If you know anything about NVIDIA and Linux, you'll know why I'm installing Windows on this thing. That is why I'm partnering with my new friends over at PCBWay. PCBWay isn't just a high quality PCB shop with competitive prices. It's also a community of makers and engineers. But in the meantime, go ahead and check out what else PCBWay has to offer with the link in the description. And when that video is finished, it'll go here. But in the meantime, check out where it all started. Peace.